Guys, I hope you all can see the screen. I would like to know more about you guys. So few of you have joined. Few of you have joined from your places. Like, I would like to know what you are doing currently. Are you working? Are you studying? In which branch you are studying? Or if at all like, we are looking for job, please put it in the chat window. Guys, I hope you all can hear me. Okay, very good. Looking for job. Okay. BCA final year, looking for job. Working. Fine. Guys, actually, I am recording it from my side and I will upload it to YouTube. From there, you can just see the video. You cannot record it locally. Okay, very good. Now, let me just tell you what are the concepts that we are going to see for today. We are just going to get an introduction to Spring. What is Spring? What is dependency injection? What is IOC container? What is a Spring bean? What are the modules that are available in Spring? And what is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? So these are the topics that we are going to see. See, whenever I'm doing a training, I have got this particular question that I want to learn Spring Boot. Then I advise them, you first learn Spring, then move on to Spring Boot. People get confused what is Spring and what is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot. What exactly it is. We will discuss all these topics one by one. In the end, I will actually tell you what is the real difference between Spring and Spring Boot. What is that you need to use it. Okay. Now let us get started. So we will get an introduction about Spring. Any idea about Spring? Any idea about Spring, guys? You can just, I want to have an interactive session. If you know the answers, you can put the answers in the chat window. Yeah, very good. Spring is a framework. Spring is an open source framework. But actually, Spring is an open source framework which is built on top of Java. Getting it? Can you see me, guys? I hope you all can see me, right? So it is an open source framework which is built on top of Java. With Spring, what and all I can do? I can develop console-based applications. Console-based applications means what? It will run only in the console. Then I can develop web applications. What exactly is the meaning of it? It is like a MVC architecture. It will have a front end, the middleware part, that is the back end, and which can connect to the database. So model view controller architecture. This is a web application. Using Spring, I can develop web applications. Also, I can develop REST APIs. REST APIs means what? Representational state transfer. So in this case, you are going to concentrate only on the backend part. The front end will be developed by somebody else. Maybe it is developed on React, or it can be another Spring application. When two software applications wants to communicate between each other, they should communicate with a known language. So for that, they use XML or they use JSON. Now in this scenario, you create your Spring application and you are exposing all your methods as REST endpoints. I hope you all can understand. Suppose I am running a company. I do not want to handle the accounts. I do not want to handle the marketing part. What I will do outsourcing. So in this scenario, my part is little, my part is different from the other part completely. Is this clear? Now, what is MVC? In case of MVC, everything is taken care by one complete application. So this whole thing will be deployed. Database, of course, will be outside. This will be deployed as WAR, WebRQ file. It is like a proprietary application. It is something like a company which is having all the facilities. Everything is taken care by this company itself. But when you talk about this one, I am just going to handle only what I need. Suppose if you talk about any e-commerce application, be it Amazon or Flipkart or Swiggy. When you are ordering food, when you want to pay, what happens? It goes through a payment gateway to another website. So from one application, it is trying to connect to another application. In this scenario, we use Spring REST APIs. I hope it is clear. And now going forward, the real world, people will be using only REST APIs. On top of it, using Spring, we also create microservices. Okay. We also create and work with microservices. I hope it is clear. Fine. So Spring is an open source framework. That is okay, fine. What is the advantage? Why should I going for Spring when I am comfortable working with Java? I want to create an application. I am creating a simple application using Java and I am executing it. It is working perfectly fine. Then what is the point of going in for Spring framework? Now let us understand that. Let me rub this off. In case of Spring, Spring supports the concept of dependency injection. It means Spring helps to develop loosely coupled applications. What is the meaning of loosely coupled applications? Whenever we are creating applications, the components are tightly coupled between each other. I will explain it with a simple example. The difference between tight coupling and loose coupling. Earlier, before laptops came, before tablets came, people were working only with desktop. It means you have to go to the place where your desktop is available. You have to sit there and you have to work with your system. It means that you are tightly coupled with your system. What about laptop? Laptop is mobile. You can take it from one room to another room and you can work comfortably. It is like portable. Similarly, one more example. Now you can work with a wireless mouse. It means if my laptop is even far away, from here I can control my laptop, right? So it is loosely coupled. One latest example I will tell you for loosely coupled is, suppose say you are having your mobile phone and if you are going to talk to your friend, you have to keep your phone in your ear and you need to talk it. With if you're having earphones, what you do? You connect it to your phone and you are just connecting. I mean, again, you are talking with your friend. What it is tightly coupled because it is wired. Now you are having wireless earpods, you are having wireless headphones. It means it is loosely coupled. There is relationship between these two, but they are loosely coupled. I hope it is clear. Spring helps to develop loosely coupled applications. For that, Spring uses the concept of dependency injection. Okay, Spring uses the concept of dependency injection. Now let us understand what is dependency injection with a simple example. Guys, actually, first I will explain everything using this. Then we will go through the PPT so that it is easier for you to understand what actually we have learned. Now let us understand what is dependency injection. Dependency injection. See, the name itself explains. Injecting the dependencies. Suppose, say, for example, I am working in Java. I have got an employee class. Class employee, which is having few instance variables. String name. And I'm having another class, class address. In the address class, I'm having two instance variables, city and state. Okay. Now, in my employee class, I'm going to have address as an instance variable. I hope you all can understand this. In my employee class, I'm having name. Name is of type string. Then I'm having address. Address is of type address itself. That is employee class depends on address. If I have to work with my laptop, I need a mouse. So my laptop is dependent on the mouse. Earlier, it was a wired connection. Now it is wireless. It means it is loosely coupled. Got it? Similarly, here I have got employee and I have got address class. Now, how do you create and how do you work with it? Say, for example, now I want to create an employee object. So, how do we create an employee object? Employee, EMP is equal to new employee. First, you create the employee object. Then, I want to set the name and I want to set the address. So how can we do it? There are many ways of doing it. So we will see the first way. I have created an employee object. I need to set the name. I need to set the address. So for setting the name, we will write it as emp.setName. Guys, this is not Spring. What we are talking now is Java. We are trying to understand why we are moving from Java to Spring. In case of Java, if I am having two classes, employee and address, employee class has a dependency of address. So in the scenario, how do we set the values? So we need to call the setter method. So I have created an employee object. I am calling the setter method. And now I have to set the address also. It means first I need to create the address object. Address is equal to new address. Then I need to set the address at state and city. Address dot set state. Address dot set city. Correct? We need to set the values. After setting the values, now I need to set the address. emp dot set address. And I need to pass the address object. So as a developer, if I am working in an application, it is mandatory that first I need to create the employee object. Then also I need to create the address object. And then I need to explicitly inject the address object into employee. Whenever you are working with Java application, this is how you have to do it. Suppose, what is the problem in this? Suppose say I created an address reference and I forgot to add equal to new address. Now what will happen? This value will be null. It means that you are trying to add a null reference to the employee. This is the biggest issue. Getting it? This is one way of adding address to employee. What is the other way of creating an employee object? I can simply write employee is equal to new employee. I can go in for a parameterized constructor. In the parameterized constructor, I can pass the employee name. I can pass the address object. So for this, the address object should be already created. I hope it is clear. So when a class is having a dependency of the other class, the dependencies can be injected either using the constructor, that is we are using a parameterized constructor, or using setter methods. This is the only way that we can work in Java. This is what we have been doing all these years. Then it means that it is tight coupling. Suppose say if I am missing somewhere to create an address object, it will throw an exception. If I am missing somewhere while passing the values in the constructor, explicitly I need to pass the address object. If they are trying to change the properties of address, my application will break. So to avoid this, we are going in for Spring framework. What is the advantage? Spring framework is going to perform all these operations. That is, whatever dependencies are needed for a class. Say, for example, let me erase this. Say, for example, in our case, we are having employee and address. Guys, now I am talking in terms of Spring. I am having two classes, employee and address. Employee class depends on address class. In the scenario, actually in Java, it is your duty that you need to create the address object and add it to the employee object. But when you are working with Spring, Spring is responsible for creating all the objects in your application. Suppose say you have created an application which is having so many objects, like say for example, employee, address, employee service implementation, employee repository implementation. I have created multiple classes. When I am working with the Java application, explicitly I need to create an object and then I need to work with it. That's what we have been doing now. Correct? But in case of Spring, if a class is having another class as dependency, that is employee depends on address, means Spring framework is responsible for creating the address object. First, we create the address object and inject the address object into employee. Dependency injection. Injecting the dependencies for a particular class. I hope it is clear. Injecting the dependencies. Okay. Now, When I say injecting the dependencies, how it will inject the dependencies? As usual, it is the same scenario. Either it will use constructor-based dependency injection. Yeah, sure. I will repeat it again. I'll repeat it again. Yeah. Suppose say I'm having two classes, employee class and address class in my application. If I am working in Java, I have to create an employee object. I need to create the address object. I need to set the address object to the employee. I have to do all these things explicitly. But if I'm going to work with Spring framework, whatever objects are needed for your application will be created by Spring framework itself. Spring will create the Java objects needed for your application. Okay. When you say Java objects, it is not relevant. So they are called as Spring Beans. These are called as Spring Beans. Now, Spring is trying to create an object of employee. First, it is creating an object of address. It is created. Now, it is trying to create an object of employee. What it is noticing? Employee depends on address. So, Spring Framework will create an address object and inject the address object into employee object. I hope I'm making it clear. Spring framework, when the moment you run it, Spring framework, what it will do? It will go and scan your application. Whatever objects are needed for your application, it will create all the objects for your application. Now, in my case, I'm having two objects to be created. One is address, another one is employee. First, it will go and create the address object. Now, it has to create the employee object. But what about employee? Employee depends on address object. So, Spring Framework will automatically create the employee object and it will inject the address object into employee. How can it inject? By using constructor or by using setter-based dependency injection. Okay. Narendra, actually, I am just starting with the basics of Spring. I'm just explaining what is Spring Framework. So this is just an introduction to Spring Framework. So what we have seen is Spring is an open source framework which is used for developing console-based applications, web applications, and REST APIs. Why should I go in for Spring when I'm very comfortable with Java? With Java itself, I can create all these applications. If you are using JSP servlets, you can create a web application. With plain Java, you can create REST APIs. But why are people moving forward to Spring Framework? Because of dependency injection. When I'm having a proper earphones, which is wired, it means that I am coupled to that one. In case of earphones, you have to plug it. It means you have to carry your phone wherever you are walking, even if you are walking in your house. But if you are using a wireless headphones or wireless AirPods, in that scenario, you can keep your phone in a long distance, still it will work perfectly fine. Means they are loosely coupled. Similarly, in case of Spring Framework, as a developer, you just create the classes. The objects needed for your applications will be created by your Spring Framework. Okay. Now, in this case, okay, all these we have to. How actually Spring Framework achieves this? For this, Spring uses a concept called as IOC container. IOC container means inversion of control container. Okay. What is this? It is nothing but an interface. Okay. They have created it as an interface. There are two interfaces. One is the top level, one is Bean Factory, below which you are having application context. This is a sub interface. What is the purpose of these two interfaces? The moment you run your application, this IOC container will pitch in. It will get started. What it will do? It will scan through all the packages. Whatever packages you have given, it will scan through all the packages. and it will identify whatever classes are having the appropriate annotations. Suppose I have created an employee class. Just the same example. I have created an employee class employee. I have created an address class address. Now I want the IOC container to create an object for these two classes. So in this scenario, I need to annotate the class with @component. Here also, you need to annotate the class with @component. If a class is annotated with @component, automatically the IOC container will create an object of that particular class. In my case, employee class is there, so Spring will create an object of employee. Address class is there, Spring will create an object of address. But if a class has another class's dependency, if I have added address, in this scenario, what is that? There is a relationship. Employee depends on address. So Spring Framework should first create address object and inject address object into employee, correct? So for that, we will use one more annotation. I'm just going through a glance. We will see this in detail later. So we have to use @AutoWire. It means please wire address object into employee, or please inject address object into employee. So who is responsible for doing all these? The IOC container. How does the IOC container know that there are relationship between all these classes? So for that only we are using annotation. Let me just give a very nice pictorial representation. In your Java, you are having all Java classes. They are called as POJOs. POJOs means plain old Java objects. Okay. Now, this is the IOC container. This IOC container is responsible for creating the objects that are needed for your application. My dear guys, please understand, Spring is not going to do any magic for you. It is just going to keep the setup ready for you. Suppose say you are organizing a function, a chief guest is coming. So what you have to do? You have to set up the stage, keep the mic ready, keep the air cooler ready, the water ready, the garland ready, right? Similarly, Spring Framework is creating the setup ready for your application. Will it do the logic for you? No, you have to sit and write the logic. Will it do other work for you? No, you need to do all the work that is needed for your application. Only thing that it will do is it will create the objects that are needed for your application. Of course, it provides other kinds of supports. We will discuss about that later. But now, how the IOC container will know that, okay, fine, I need to create these objects. I need to inject this object to this particular class. For that, Spring uses something called as configuration metadata. This is like a manual. If I'm purchasing a mic or if I'm purchasing a laptop, what actually I want to see? I need to see the manual or the assembling instructions, correct? Similarly, here it is called as configuration metadata. This configuration metadata can be annotations or it can be Java-based configuration or it can be XML-based configuration. This XML-based configuration has become very old one. It is legacy. People prefer to use only annotations if you are working with your own classes. But if you are working with the external classes, you want to create an object for a data source to connect to the database. You are working with security. You want to provide authentication and authorization. In that scenario, you need to create objects of inbuilt classes, right? You should never ever use new keyword in your application. Why? Because Spring Framework is responsible for creating the objects. But if you want to work with external classes, you need to use Java-based configuration. We will be discussing about this later on. Okay. Now, the moment you give the POJOs and the XML, the configuration metadata, Spring Framework will create a ready-to-run application. Your application is now ready to run. I hope it is clear. So now what is that we have seen? We have seen what is Spring Framework and what is dependency injection. In case of dependency injection, there are two types of dependency injection. One is setter-based dependency injection. The other one is constructor-based dependency injection. What is the difference between these two? In case of constructor-based dependency injection, Spring Framework, while creating the employee object itself, it will go and call the constructor. It will inject the address object. What is setter-based dependency injection? First, it will create the employee object. Then it will call the address. I mean, e.employee.setAddress method. That is setter-based dependency injection. Okay. So, who will give the configuration metadata details? As developers, we need to give the details to Spring Framework. Automatically, it will perform the work for you. Now, let me go to the PPT. Whatever we have seen till now, it is available. Let us just go through that. Okay. Now see this. What is Spring? Why we need Spring? What is dependency injection? See the advantages. Spring is an open source framework which is used for developing enterprise applications. That is web applications, console-based applications, REST APIs. It is lightweight and promotes POJO-based programming. That is also one other important thing. My dear guys, actually before Spring came, people were working with something called as EJB, Enterprise Java Beans. We have been teaching EJB also before years before into, 2006, 7 and all, we were working with EJBs. Spring Framework supports POJO-based programming. What is the meaning of it? When I'm working with EJB, I'm tightly coupled to EJB. It means I need to extend this, implement this, all that are mandatory. But if I am working with Spring, I don't have to extend or implement any inbuilt classes of Spring. I hope you can understand. POJOs mean plain old Java objects. It doesn't extend any external class or implement any external interface. They are called as POJOs. Earlier, when people were working with EJB, they need to extend some external classes and also implement external interfaces. When Spring Framework came into structure, the only first advantage is it doesn't ask you to extend any external interfaces, classes or implement external interfaces. Okay. It supports POJO-based programming. That's what. Why Spring? Spring uses the concept of dependency injection to develop loosely coupled application. Okay. One advantage of Spring is Spring has got a set of modules. It is like packets. Okay. It's not like a huge application. It's not like a huge API. Suppose say, if I want to work just with the database, I can download only that particular library. If I want to create a REST API, I can use only that particular jar files. If I want to create a web application, I can pick and choose whatever I want. I hope you can understand. So it is working with module-based programming. So it is having its own set of Spring modules to work with. Is it clear? Instead of me, if I'm going to the gym, I'll just take the gym clothes and gym accessories. If I'm going to office, I'll take only that particular accessories. If I'm going for a picnic, I'll take only that particular accessories. Assume if I'm having a huge suitcase with all these things dumped together, even though if I don't do, it will become heavy. Similarly, when people were working with EJB, it was very heavy. In case of Spring, it is lightweight because it is having different modules. Okay. What is dependency injection? Dependency is a concept. Injection is a concept in which the dependencies needed for a class will be injected. So here, same example, when there are two classes, employee and address. Employee class depends on address class. So if I want to create an employee object, an instance of address has to be injected using properties, that is using setter method or using constructor. Let us see that example. Just like whatever I have told. It is having a default constructor, parameterized constructor, getter setter methods, all that are available. Now see, if I am using a setter method, if it is Java, how will you write it? Address is equal to new address. Then create an employee object. Then call setAddress method. If it is using a constructor, then first you create an address object. Then you create an employee object. Inject the address object into employee. My dear guys, if you are working with Java, this is what you will be doing. What I have given is a very, very basic example of employee and address. In real-time scenarios, you will be working with service layers. repository layers. The repository layers connecting to data source. The data source connecting to the database. The whole hierarchy will be over there. It means there one class depends on another class, that is class A depends on B, B depends on C, C depends on D. It is a hell lot of hierarchy which where the dependency is available. So just to make the concept simpler, I have given it like this. So in this case, explicitly while creating the employee object, I am injecting the address object. If I forget or if I am forgetting to create the address object, it is gone. It will throw null pointer exception. Okay. Now, what are the advantages of Spring Framework? Spring Framework. Guys, any questions? Okay, this PPT. Okay. Any more questions, guys? Okay. I'll explain. Now, a few more advantages. Let us just go through this. Spring Framework helps to develop all these applications. If I'm working with an MVC application, then I don't even need an application server. I can work with a simple Tomcat server. Spring has IOC container. I told you already. If I'm going to gym, I don't have to carry a very big suitcase with all the items put together. It's enough that I carry my shoes and gym cloth and whatever, towel and water bottle. That's enough, right? Similarly, if you're working with Spring, it is enough you can use a computer with limited memory because Spring is lightweight. Okay. And what are the other advantages? Spring framework is so cool. It can integrate with any frameworks like that. Like it can integrate with struts, it can integrate with MyBatters, it can integrate with Hibernate, it can integrate with logging frameworks. And Spring translates all the technology specific exceptions. If you notice in my videos just now, I was posting about the exceptions, checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. What are checked exceptions? It is mandatory that you need to handle them using try catch or declare them using throws keyword. What are unchecked? You don't have to do anything. Automatically the exception will be thrown to the console. In case of Spring Framework, whatever exceptions are happening in the backend, that is SQL specific exception. Suppose say your password is wrong to connect to the database or your database name is wrong, it will throw SQL exception. It is mandatory that you need to handle it using try and catch. Spring makes our work easier by converting all the database specific exceptions into consistent unchecked exceptions. Meaning to say that all the exceptions will be thrown in the console. Just go to the console, read the exception and rectify it. That's how it is. Spring provides consistent transaction management. I hope you all know what is a transaction. Moving from one layer to the next layer to the next layer and coming back with the same result. That is a transaction. Whenever you are making a deal with a bank, that is a transaction. If you are paying your mobile bill or your rent, or if you are trying to pay for Swiggy, Zomato, like all these are transactions, right? So Spring Framework is responsible for taking care of the transaction in your application. Means if I'm trying to connect to the database, I'm trying to write into a file, into a table. At the same time, somebody should not touch the table and read from the table. So that integrity will be maintained. Testing Spring application will be very simple because it uses Java Bean based modules. Okay. So I hope this is clear. We have seen this. Next, the Spring architecture. I already told you what are that Spring framework is going to work with modules. So what are the modules available? Core module. If you want to develop a bare minimum basic application, then you need this core container, which is going to have core and context, within which you are having all your IOC containers. And what is a Spring Bean? It is a Java object created by the IOC container. So to working with that, it is having beans. And Spring expression language. If you are going to work with the front end, if you are throwing the data to the front end, if you want to read it, it is Spring expression language. Like in the JSP page, if you want to print the data, use SPE here. Then other than that, if you are working connecting to the database, it has data access. Connect to the database using JDBC, using ORM, that is MyBatters or Hibernate, using OXM, Object XML mapping, Java messaging services. Spring Framework also take care of the transaction. If you want to create a Spring MVC application, use web. If you want to integrate Spring with struts, use servlet. Okay. And if you want to create a REST API, it is enough you download this web module. Other than that, few other extra things also Spring Framework does. That is AOP, aspect-oriented programming. It's like a house cleaning service. I mean, at home, what you do, if after drinking coffee, you keep it on the table. You don't put your, you just put the your dresses in the washing bin. There is somebody to take care of it. Like they'll just go clean, keep your things ready, everything, right? So AOP does that for Spring. Will take care of all the backend services like logging, transaction. It will be taken, exceptions. It will be taken care by AOP, aspect-oriented programming. So that is that layer. Okay. So you can just have a look. Core module is having the main from parts. It is very, very important. It takes care of the IOC and dependency injection. We talked about the IOC container. It is Bean factory. Okay. Now, what is IOC container? It is a technique used inversion of control. It is when if there are two classes, A depends on B. B is created by A through constructor or properties. We are doing it explicitly. This is called as type coupling. By inversion of control, the control is reversed. If B with Spring, B, that is the address object, will be injected into A, that is the employee class, either using constructor or using properties by the IOC container. So these objects are loosely coupled. I hope it is clear, very clear, right? Okay. So what is the advantage of Spring? Spring helps to develop loosely coupled application using the concept of dependency injection. That's all. Dot. Now, what are the two IOC containers? One is Bean factory, other one is application context. Okay. Now, what is application context? It is responsible for creating, instantiating means creating objects using new keyword, configuring and assembling the beans. If employee depends on address, it has to create address object, create employee object, and inject employee object into, inject address object into employee object. It has to do a lot of work. All these are taken care by the application context. Okay. Now, guys, this is the one which we were talking about. Java, Pojo classes, metadata, Spring container. Now you are having a ready-to-use application. Okay. Now, what is a Spring Bean? Spring Bean is a Java object that is created and assembled and managed by the IOC container. Whatever objects that are created by the IOC container are called as Spring Beans. This is all very clear. I hope it is clear till now, right? Some questions? Yes. Now, what is XML-based configuration, annotation, Java-based configuration? We will see now. And what is the purpose of Tomcat? We will see the Tomcat purpose. I mean, what is the use of Tomcat also? Just now we will see. Just give me 2 minutes. Okay. I hope it is clear till this part. Let me just quickly move on to the next one. So what is this we have seen? Java, Pojo classes, our classes. The container also we have seen. What is metadata? Let us see what is this metadata. Configuration metadata. It means it is something, it's like a manual, okay. Suppose if you are purchasing a light or if you are purchasing a what is it, a mic. I need to assemble this mic. So what I need? I need a manual. So I can read from the manual and I can assemble the mic. Similarly, Spring Framework has to know what are all the classes that are there in your application or what are all the packages that are all in the application, which class depends on which class. All these information should be available. So for that, Spring Framework uses configuration metadata. The configuration metadata can be in the form of XML, annotation-based, and Java-based configuration. What is XML? You will be creating an explicit XML file and you will be adding it. Anyways, I will show you that now. But now it is legacy. People don't use it. Annotation-based configuration. That is, every class should be annotated with at component annotation at component. It means the moment I add at component, Spring Framework will understand, okay, fine, I need to create an object for this particular class. And what is the third one? Java-based configuration. Guys, this is explicitly used only for external classes. if you want to configure a data source, if you want to configure the classes for security, you cannot create an object using new keyword. You are instructing Spring to create an object for that particular class. So you will be using Java-based configuration. Okay. So it is having bean definitions. Like XML you will see that. Okay. What are all the Spring B objects that I can do? I can create Java objects for service layer. I can create Java objects for repository layer, for JMS queues, for normal Java classes, for everything you can create it, guys. Do not get confused. Just understand the concept. While doing it, you will get more understanding. So this is the XML based configuration. See, I want to create an object of employee. In which package it is com.spring.setter employee. And what is the dummy name that I want to give? Employee. Similarly, I want to create an object of address. So what is the dummy name I want to give? Address B. So this is using XML. I'm just skipping it. Just understand. Earlier people use this. Next is annotation based configuration. If I want the Spring framework, Spring IOC container to create an object of my class, the class should be annotated with @component. Clear? Okay. Now in this case, this particular class is so here again it means I am having an address class also. This address class also is annotated with @component annotation. Okay, I hope it is clear. This is also annotated with @component. This is my address class. Bear with my handwriting. The stylus is not working here. Now, student depends on address. So we have used one other annotation called as @auto-wired. Okay. So these are all the basic concepts that we need. Now, what is the next step? Now, this Java based we will deal later. Now we have to create the IOC container. Now let me go back to this one. Guys, now understand this. So you have learned your class will be your application will be having classes, employee class, address class. Assume they are in a particular package, com.switch.training. Now what is the next step? I have to create an application. How do you create an application? Most of you would have learned about Spring, Spring Boot and all, right? Now, in this case, please understand, when you are working with Spring Framework, it is not at all necessary to use Spring Boot. Using basic Maven itself, you can create Spring applications. You can create Spring MVC application. With Maven itself, you can create Spring REST APIs. Everything, it will work perfectly fine. Then why are people moving on to Spring Boot? What is the advantage? Let us see this. I will explain it. Now that we have learnt everything, I have my student class, I have employee class, I have address class, all that I have created. So, and I have annotated it with that component. What is the next step in our pictorial representation? My Pojo classes are ready. My configuration is ready. I need to create the IOC container. So how do you create the IOC container? Explicitly, you need to create it, just like how I have done. Just have a look. Just have a look. So explicitly, I need to write application context. See the last one. First two you forget. Application context is equal to new annotation config application context. That is, I need to inform the IOC container where exactly my Java classes are. So for that, we write the code like this. Application context is equal to new annotation config application context, within which you have to provide the package structure. If suppose say my classes are inside com.switch, I need to provide the package structure. So what IOC container will do? We go and check in this particular package and the sub package of this, like com.switch.examples, com.switch.service, com.switch.training. You go inside those packages. Identify all the classes that are annotated with @component, and then it will create the objects. Okay, so now all the objects are created and kept ready. Now what I need? I need the employee object. So how to get the employee object? I can call it from the context. Context.getBean. But what will be the name of the bean that is created? Suppose if I'm having an employee class, this employee class is annotated with add component. So what will be the bean name? The bean name will be lowercase of this. If it is employee, now the bean name will be lowercase employee. If the class name is student details, the bean name will be yes lowercase student details. That is, it is expecting camel case. I hope you all can understand this. Okay. So now I can get the employee object. After getting the employee object, you can call all the methods of the employee class. That's it. Is this clear? So in case of Spring Framework, I am creating this application using Maven. Maven is a project management tool. After creating the application, all the classes, it is my duty that I need to create the IOC container. It is my duty that I need to get the beans that are created by the IOC container. It is going to give it to me. So how do you retrieve it? You have to call it using context.getBean. See here, context.getBean. How many beans how many objects it will create for every class? Only one single object. These objects are called as, Spring Framework uses the design pattern singleton. Means only one single object will be created. How many times you ask for only the same object will be created, given to you? Okay, it is something like, what actually is the meaning of it? I'm creating an object and I'm giving it to the application. The application has to use it. If you go to the railway station, there will be water cans, right? Where they will change the tumbler and have it. So what is the meaning of it? How many times people are asking water? You have to use the same glass only. The glass will become dirty. The glass will have stains, but still no choice for you. You have to use the same glass only. Similarly, when you say singleton, only one single object will be created by the IOC container for that particular class. Okay, guys, the time is going to be over. Now let us see what is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot. Is it mandatory to learn Spring Framework before jumping into Spring Boot? Yes. Why? Because I will tell you the difference. What is Spring? Spring actually is the proper framework to develop all these applications. Then what is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is just a tool which makes the work easier. It helps to create ready-to-run application. A ready-to-run application. That is okay. What exactly is the meaning of it? I will tell you. When you are working with Spring, that is using Maven, that time there is no choice. You have to use Maven, okay? When you are working with Spring, in this case, Spring is a framework we told. You have to explicitly create the IOC container. You need to create the IOC container. Correct. In case of Spring Boot, the IOC container will be created automatically. I don't have to create it. In case of Spring, if you are developing an MVC application or if you are developing a REST API, you need to work with the Tomcat. You need to use the Tomcat server. In case of Spring Boot, it provides embedded Tomcat server. Embedded Tomcat server. The moment you add web dependency, when you're creating a web application form.xml, if you add web dependency, automatically Spring Framework will understand, okay, fine, she is using, she is creating an MVC application and it will provide the Tomcat server for me. Okay, so it has embedded Tomcat server. Spring Framework Spring Boot also provides the default security setup. So guys, it is making our life easier. Earlier, if I want to buy milk, what I have to do? I have to go all the way to the shop and get it. Now, the milk comes in packet directly to my house, which can be consumed immediately. Or if I want to buy something like, If I want to make some rotis for my dinner, I have to go to the kitchen, knead the knead the flour, make the atta, and then knead the roti, and then only I can eat it, right? But now if I just click on the button and just order it, automatically it will come to me directly. Many facilities are there. With the roti, I will get also gravy. I don't have to sit and prepare the gravy, right? Similarly, for developing Spring applications only, we are using Spring Boot. You cannot learn Spring Boot directly. It is always advisable to start with Spring Framework and then use Spring Boot for developing Spring applications. Actually, you are using Spring Boot for developing Spring applications, be it Spring console-based application or MVC applications or REST APIs. That is the main thing you need to know. With Spring Boot, what and all you have the advantage? It supports external configuration. It has embedded Tomcat support. It provides the metrics of your application. It has got certain auto configuration tools. What is the meaning of it? You add web, it will understand, okay, she is going to create a REST API and automatically it will add an embedded Tomcat server. You add security, it will create a default security stuff for you. You add database specific dependency, automatically it will configure your in-memory database H2 for you. So all these things, some external support the Spring Boot is providing, and it is making my work easier. So people are preferring to use Spring Boot rather than creating a Spring application using Maven. Guys, please understand this is a tool. Okay. So let me just show you that one simple PPT, and with that we will wind up. Just one top PPT. So just see the first line. Spring Boot helps to bootstrap a Spring application only. Guys, see that. With all the necessary jars. Whatever dependencies you are having, you can just pick and choose. Tick, 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 tick. Automatically all the dependencies will be added. Just like how you order in your food delivery apps. You just go and select it and click submit. Automatically it will be ordered. Similarly, if I want to develop a web application, select web. If I want to develop a data application, database application, select that particular thing. If you are working with Maven, you have to go to the browser. You need to choose the dependencies all by yourself. But here it is not the case. All the dependencies will be added automatically. You have to pick and choose it. Okay. So that is the main advantage. It helps to create applications that are ready to run. You can add all the third-party libraries without much fuss. That's what. If I want to order something, I don't have to walk down to the road to get my items delivered. I just go to online shopping app. I can select a certain items. I click submit. It is delivered to me. Same way is your Spring Boot, guys. It has got so many advantages for developing Spring applications in a faster manner. That's why people prefer to use it. In case of Maven, you have to do so many logic, so many processes for developing a simple Spring MVC application. That is not required in this case. Okay. Using Spring Boot, you can develop web applications and also REST APIs. The same thing. So I hope it is clear. Today we have gone through the basics of Spring Framework. I would like to know the feedback. Guys, were you all able to understand it? Yeah. Please share your feedback in the chat window. We are at the end of the session. I will upload this video in the, to YouTube. Yeah. I will be continuing every week. You can just join together with me. And also I'm having a series of videos on Spring. You can just go through that videos also, which will be really helpful. The version of Spring that we will be learning is Spring 3.1. Okay. You have learned Spring Boot means core Java is enough for to learn. Okay, for working with Spring, you need to be very good in Java, guys. People think Spring is different, Java is different, Spring Boot is different. No. Spring is built on top of Java. Only if you are good in Java, you can work with Spring. In case of Java, you have to be very good in interfaces, hooks, concepts, exception handling. These three, and collection framework. Obviously, collection framework. Interfaces, exception handling, oops, concepts, and collection framework. So technically, I'm covering everything. So you have to be very good in that. Then JSP servlets are not required. Directly can jump to Spring. from Spring to Spring Boot. That's a flow. Spring just understand the concepts. All the concepts are same for Spring Boot also. Many people ask me, I am learning, I know Spring Boot, but they don't know the difference. Spring is what you need to know. Spring Boot is just a tool. Okay. Yeah, core is enough. Core is, Hibernate is required to learn Spring. For Spring basics, you don't need Hibernate. For Spring REST API, you don't need Hibernate. If you are going to connect to the database, then just have a basic understanding of Hibernate. What is Hibernate? Hibernate is a ORM framework. How actually Spring is using Hibernate to connect to the database, you need to get to know. But with data-jpa only, we will be teaching it. So it's not a big deal. What type of configuration is recommended? Annotation is recommended. Annotation is the recommended one. Okay. ORM basics is enough. ORM basics is enough. Because here you will be using JPQL, Java Persistence Query Language. And guys, actually you cannot say, in one corporate they asked me to teach with IBATIS, that is MyBATIS. So you cannot say that whether they are using Hibernate or JPQL, I mean JPA or MyBATIS. That may be different. Okay. So thank you so much for your time, guys. We will wind up the session. Yes. Hibernate, just have a basic understanding. That's enough.